So I think we will get started, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon officially from myself, Ian Golding, and Tommi Tallgren from Aiwo. We are so delighted that you're taking the time to join us for this very special webinar this afternoon to focus on a subject that is critically important from a customer experience perspective, but also a subject that is very close to both my heart and Tommi's heart. And I am going to have the pleasure of hosting the session today on behalf of Tommi and the Aiwo team. And you're going to hear a little bit from me before I pass over to Tommi for the most important part of the session today. Because this is all about practical application. If you've ever heard me speaking before, you will know that my focus is not just on the theory of customer experience, but it's taking that theory to deliver practical, demonstrable change. And when it comes to the subject of customer experience measurement, and specifically what we do with VOC having captured it, many organizations are failing to turn VOC into actionable, demonstrable, measurable change. And what Tommi and I would love to share with you today is not just why that's important. I think we know why it's important, but to really give you exposure to tools that exist that can help you and your organization to make that happen. You are going to hear, as I say, a little bit from me now. You will hear from Tommi as well, but we urge you to ask questions. If you have questions from me or for Tommi, please use either the chat or the Q&A functionality in Zoom. And at the end of Tommi's presentation, and once I've done a short summary, I will then pitch those questions either to Tommi or I will answer them myself. So please make sure that you do interact if you would like to. But what I'd love to do before I officially introduce Tommi is to set the scene. And again, if you have heard me speaking before, this will be a reminder of what I strongly believe needs to be in place for an organization to deliver measurable change. If you haven't heard me speak before, I'm hoping that this will give you a more clear narrative as to why it's so important that we don't just capture data, but that we do something with it. Over the last 10 years or so, organizations around the world have, as we know, become increasingly proficient at talking about customer experience and acting on what they're talking about. And there are a number of different activities that we've seen in varying degrees of volume, from customer experience measurement to customer journey mapping to various initiatives related to customer culture. But when it comes to bringing all of those things together, there are sadly far too few case studies that enable us to understand how to combine different interconnected competencies to deliver real change. One of the weaknesses in customer experience adoption that I've observed around the world is a lack of understanding of what to do with the customer journey. Organizations are obsessed with mapping journeys, but what are they actually doing with the journey they map? And as a result, for 4 years at least now, I've been preaching about the importance of not customer journey mapping, but customer journey management, a continuous interconnected cycle of activity. The cycle of activity that you see in this image. That cycle of activity, whilst there are many things that are happening in organizations around the world, much of what is happening is ad hoc and not connected. The cycle of activities is, as you see, understanding who the customer is in the first place, so we can visualize their journey, so we can then measure their journey to identify the small number of priorities having the greatest negative effect on customer perception and, as a result, financial performance. And when we know what the priorities are, we then do something with them. I say we do something with them. What I should say is we should do something with them, because that cycle I've just walked you through is rarely happening in this way. What we're seeing are journeys being mapped, not aligned to the customer, but being mapped by channel or by product. When journeys are being mapped, what we're then not always seeing is organizations effectively and robustly measuring that journey. We're seeing lots of organizations who are measuring the customer experience, but what they're measuring isn't aligned to the customer journey. Very often that's because the measurement system was put in place before the journey was understood. And unfortunately, whilst many organizations do have a good idea as to what their priorities are, it's remarkable how few are taking action against those priorities. And there are a number of reasons why that is the case. One is because many organizations don't know what action to take. But there is another fundamental issue, that far too often measurement is focused on scores, not on driving measurable change. And what that means is that we are gathering insight as part of a measurement system, but the insight we're gathering far too often isn't actionable. At the end of the day, if an organization has an aspiration to become customer-centric, which means you're able to differentiate everything you do on the whole experience, that can only happen if you are in a position to drive real, continuous, measurable change. In other words, you need to be in a position to gather data, including customer insight, so you can then act on that insight and deliver real change. If you move to the next slide for me, please, Tommi. When I talk about measurement, again, I just want to provide a little bit of context before I pass over to Tommi to explore how do we gather and act on VOC. In other words, how do we create real actionable insight? What you're looking at is what I call the high-level view of robust customer experience measurement. We should be capturing, listening to, and acting on three voices of measurement. VOC, as we know, is voice of the customer. VOE is voice of the employee, and VOP is voice of the process. Most organizations around the world, not all, but most, are measuring some form of VOC. But as I'm already intimating, just because they're measuring it does not mean they're measuring it well. Far fewer organizations are measuring VOE and VOP. One of the challenges with VOC is that VOC should be giving you a measurable understanding of the effect everything your organization does. It tells you how your customers feel about what you do. What VOC will not always tell you is why they are feeling that way. And so it is important that when you think about measuring the customer experience, you think about having a measurable understanding of cause and effect, the relationship between what you do and the way the customer feels about what you do. At the moment, far too many are not creating a measurable relationship between cause and effect. And as a result, we can capture the effect of what we do in VOC, but that won't always help us to understand what it is we need to do, what it is we need to fix to improve perception and, as a result, financial performance. And that allows me to just clarify that there is a fourth voice of measurement, a fourth voice that we call voice of the business. I know I often state the blindingly obvious, but it is vital that we, as people either in full-time CX roles or with an interest in customer experience, that we're able to make the connection between the way we measure the customer experience and the way the business measures its performance, what I call voice of the business. And we need to be able to make it very clear what the relationship is between these things. If you're measuring VOC or any of the voices at all, but you cannot create an understanding of the relationship between those voices and voice of the business, then it's very possible that you are not measuring the experience in the right way. We should always be able to make a connection. And this is why ensuring that your VOC is actionable is so critical. Because if it's not actionable, the likelihood of you impacting voice of the business is minimal. And we all know that there are still many businesses and many business leaders who do not feel that customer experience actually delivers, really makes a difference. And that is just not true. But unfortunately, we just far too often are not making the connection. And that's why I'm so delighted to introduce you to Tommi. Now, I know some of you listening to this know Tommi and the Aiwo team, but many of you have not come across Tommi or the Aiwo team before. And I'm delighted to collaborate with them today to allow you to see what it really looks like to capture data and manage it in a way that allows you to turn that data into something that is actionable. This is the kind of thing that we should all be looking at utilizing in our organizations. But far too often, the kind of technology that the Aiwo team have created, there just isn't enough awareness that it's there. And when Tommi first explained to me what Aiwo can do, I got very excited. And as a result, I'm delighted that he is able to share with you what their technology does and how it can help you to make your VOC actionable. So with that as my introduction, hopefully I've done you a good service there, Tommi, in setting you up. Let me pass over to you so you can explain all.
Thank you very much, Ian. And by the way, there was no introduction to Ian, but I think that most of us in the CX world already know he's really a global evangelist for the CX, and as you were seeing, gathering the information, I think, for hundreds of different companies, and also knowing the practical issues with the CX. Absolutely. And also maybe knowing the.
And I didn't want to bore everyone, Tommi, with an intro to me, so that's why.
But that is that what you were just telling out was also the kind of the practical headaches of the people running the CX and CX teams to kind of make the things and make the change happening in their own company. And this is also something where we come to the picture. I have a couple of slides. I have 3 examples, one slide here, and 3 practical examples of the real life cases. And I hope this will open up the different or answering some of the questions you might have in your life and your work life. And if not, please point out those questions in the Q&A and a chat window. But as Ian said, I mean, it's a continuous process. There was a different kind of this cycle of activity, and that's how simple it is in kind of improving your business with the voice of customer data. And we just have this gather, realize, improve kind of 3 steps. You need to gather the data, and when we talk about data in our world, so ideally it's a digitalized data. So gather the data, and then where we come to the picture is that we are helping to provide their understanding. So realize what your customers want, how they want it, and why they want it, kind of the reason why the company exists. And then to do the improvements, and improvement based on the facts and based on the data. And the data itself, so to be able to actually utilize the technologies to the data, you need to be in digital format. What it could be all of the voice call of the customer service centers, for example, or even the sales calls, wherever you actually are discussing with the customers and you actually have their voice heard. It could be those voice calls where the voice is a voice. But it could be the emails too. I mean, emails or the discussions or the chat discussions you are having with the customers, or the customer teams are having with the customers. There is the insights, what they are looking for, or what kind of issues they have with you, what are their needs and what are their pains. And of course, that is something what you want to solve the best possible way. Or the practical queries and feedback, what we have all set up already. So this is the data what you have already in your hands, and now how to utilize this data is something what I will provide with those couple of examples. There's a possibility to really provide a real-time insight of the content of the customers' talks. So that's something what we've been working now multiple years, and the technology, that's the only time I'm gonna kind of point out the technology. To utilize the AI and machine learning technologies makes it possible to listen tens of thousands of calls or read and understand the insights of thousands and thousands of emails every single day in real time. That was impossible beforehand. And that's what where the insights are coming from the content of the data, so that you are able to kind of have a situation picture, what's going on right this week, or the last month, or this year, what's going on with our customers, what they're talking today, what is important for them. The themes, we call it themes and sentiment, how they're talking about different things, and what are the top issues to fix. So there was the prioritization picture, but in Ian's slide as well. What we should fix first, because it's affecting most of the people, not because the ones who shout for most, but actually by counting how many times and how many people are saying certain issue, what bothers them. But also to provide silent signals. There's some small minority issue happening right now in the data. It's most likely going past, and you will only see it when it's a major issue in your hands. And that's what has changed now when you're able to, for example, listen all of the calls. I will show one example, real life example about that too. So that's where we come to the picture. And then when you combine the data, there was this voice of the business kind of idea. When you combine the data with other data, of course, with the KPIs, what you're looking already now, but also the let's say the business KPIs, you would know where you should fix and where you should focus first. And that's something what we are struggling multiple times with the multiple companies, is that people think that, okay, the customer service teams are the ones to do the changes and improve their services. But as we all know, that when you have the data to show that the issues where our CX score is lowering, or what issues our customers are having, what we should fix first, they are of course mostly there in the products and services what we are providing. So now you actually have a common not kind of situation picture which you can share within the company, and you are able to show to the whole company, hey, this is the real life, this is the voice coming from our customer side. We need to fix this and this issue in our billing or in our product or some quality part of the product. And then there are other issues too, that, okay, now we should inform about that and this issue so we can improve the customer experience altogether. And this improvement is all about the cultural change, and Ian is coming to back that after those 3 examples I will walk through. So one example, this is a phone call. So getting the customer or understanding why people are calling to you in the call centers. In this case, it's an electricity company providing services to millions of people. In this case, the data itself, if you look from the left-hand side, so data what we are gathering in this specific case was phone calls. So listening to all of the phone calls coming to the service lines. And one example inside, one of the first ones what we found out, and this is a publicly pointed out case in the Finnish news, for example, so we can say about it. It was I think quite a normal case in many of the large B2C organizations where something was changed in the billing, and customers were calling to the call centers to find out, hey, what is this new thing? I don't understand it. The beautiful part in this example was that when you have millions of customers, you are sending the billings one by one, first for 10 to 20,000 people, and you find out this issue by finding out those, let's say, silent signals. What we point out, and this is an example which doesn't, the data doesn't belong to this case, but there's this kind of activity change to find out in real life, okay, what is changing right now? Earlier, there was only a couple of messages. Now there's a much more messages. In this example, there's about chats and benefits. But in that case, it was about the billing and understanding the invoice. And when you get to this level insight, it kind of pops up. There's a red lights. There's a new issue coming up. It's quite rapidly growing from yesterday to today. And then when you click it, you can see all the related themes and actually the messages itself in the phone calls, why they're talking, and they could react for that one before they sent the same erroneous billings or complicated billings to next 100,000 to 1 million people. So that's an example where findings, when coming in real time, can be actionable, and you actually are saving money right there. In very practical matter how this is done and was done, so there's a REST API interfaces to the call center. So practically many times when we analyze the data in our life, so we connect to already existing data you have, already existing services you have, and we get the data in. In this case, the data is in a voice format, so we utilize the speech-to-text technologies to bring that into the textual kind of a conversation, and then the basic work what Aiwo CX is doing is to understanding the issues and the tone of the issues people talk from the content of the data. So this is one example of this kind of quickly finding out the issue based on the, let's say, the silent signals, and then acting, and then getting the results. One other case, most likely very common to you, NPS data. I mean, this is commonly used, and I actually like that the kind of standard what we are utilizing in the NPS. This is an insurance company case. This is a kind of interesting case, a specific case. So NPS data getting in. Insights, what was found out in this case, this is one example with them, what we openly discussed, was that actually the feedback was not about the services. So they have a services, they have an app, they have web services. In the app, there was no way to provide any feedback. So people would go to their website and answer for their NPS query and put the comment there. Now, the score was going down, and they didn't kind of understand what is situation is there, because there was no means to get to the content of thousands and thousands of messages. When we came to the picture, and Fenny has been very happy user of Aiwo since quite widely, so we are able to show the direct reasons behind the KPIs, the numbers, in this case NPS. So this is just one example of a shortcut from once again a different data, where we point out directly, okay, the NPS like this, the change is this much. These are the top issues in the promoter size, passive size, detractor size. So what actually is driving the people to give you the low number or high number? And these are many times not changing so much. But then the changes, if there's any changes, you can directly see that, okay, during this week or this month, the change was this much. These are the new issues arising or going away because we did the fixes. So that's something what gives you more insights in the KPIs. And practicality, in this case, most of the query systems you have, so there's an API interface once again, so we get the data in. It's really simple from our customer point of view. They don't need to do any IT projects. But then the point what we are providing there is that we analyze that real time, and we point out the topics and themes and connect that to the numbers, and that gives you once again the points where you want to do the actions and point out the fixes and improve the customer experience, and at the same time, of course, the KPI itself. And third one, which is a streaming company having thousands and thousands of open feedback coming from their website where they stream videos. And this is also open case where suddenly there was a drop in the data of utilizing the streaming data in the desktop, but also the insight that, okay, what was the new red theme coming up? And it was about autoplay. People hated that the videos start rolling automatically. It was their great idea that they could sell more videos and more advertisements. They tested out, they found out there's a huge jump actually. The utilizing data place where the autoplay was removed, and the CX score improved. And in their case, because they have a very clear numbering of what means a score number utilization, they can see the value of that. And they pointed out this was a hundreds of thousands of euros profit for them by these small changes, what they thought was a great idea, but actually the feedback itself pointed out that this was a hated idea. And this is just one example of the UI pointing out kind of the narrative of the people's feedback, even without any KPIs, that, hey, this is very negatively discussed, this is very positively discussed, what you should praise, what you should fix. That was kind of a short shot on my side. And Ian, please continue. Some practical examples of how the data can be treated and get some actions out of it.
Before you move the slides on, Tommi, I want to ask a question that always comes to my mind as a practitioner, and whether or not everyone listening to this is thinking the same thing. All of this sounds great, but how easy is it to integrate the Aiwo technology into an organization? Because as someone who's a technophobe myself, a self-confessed technophobe, all I'm thinking is, this is great, but is this going to cost me huge amounts of money? And am I going to have to try and convince an IT team to, connect everything? Just talk to everyone about, is this difficult and expensive, or is this something that actually is not too difficult to put in?
Yeah, I mean, this level of the examples what we were showing, so where you are really you're serving hundreds of thousands of people. So then, of course, I mean, it will be, you are paying some thousands of euros per month to actually have all these insights, but the return of investment could be hundreds of thousands, like in case of MTV. But the current way, I mean, to start with this one, so most of the time you are utilizing already an SaaS, like software-based platforms, to gather the data and so on. So we are actually connecting directly in those interfaces. So practically what we need from the IT teams of our customers that, hey, okay, what platforms you are using? Okay, these are the the authentication credits, what you need to give us. We are connecting with their information to this open, like secure interface and getting the data out. So if you have a data, or you have an interface from the existing systems, it could be a week, 2 weeks, and you actually have the system rolling. Okay. And this is the beauty of it. Of course, in some cases, the IT want to be there and they want to kind of utilize and send the data to us. That's also fine. We have the REST APIs, and in those large organizations, it's rather straightforward to do it also through the IT. But it is not an IT project. Okay. The data you already have, we are analyzing the data on top of that.
So again, just because I always like to just interpret what I'm seeing, one of the things that I will always teach people when I talk about VOC is that we need organizations to understand that VOC can be captured either through solicited means, in other words, pushing surveys to customers, or it can be gathered through unsolicited means, such as telephone calls into the contact center, social media interaction, website interaction. Very often, that source of unsolicited information, so phone calls and various, we don't do anything with it. And what I'm seeing is that potentially what your technology can do is take data from any source and interpret it to tell you what the key messages are that you need to act on. Is that right?
That is correct. And this is a big change what has happened when you are actually, when the system is understanding the feelings and the themes inside any kind of a text. And this kind of what we say especially in the customer care centers, that this is a treasure gave what you have already in your hands, what is not utilized. It's like a black box many times. And also the mind shift, what I think one of our customers say that it's moving from going to listening. So you are no more kind of asking, but you're actually listening from the data what you already have, and then doing the actions based on that data.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's why I think, again, for everyone listening, knowing that there are tools like Aiwo out there is so important, because we need to maximize all of the data that we've got. And far too often, what I am seeing is this obsession with surveys, for many of the right reasons. but sadly, many of the wrong reasons, means that too many organizations think that the only VOC they're capturing is from surveys, but it isn't, and I think too often we're drawing the wrong conclusion from a survey anyway, because surveys are being deployed not particularly well. They're not necessarily representative of all types of customer across the end-to-end journey. Your ability to interpret all forms of insight, captured, as I say, in that unsolicited manner, is far more likely to lead you to making the right conclusion so you can take the right action. But we can't do that manually. It's just impossible. And that's why I think if you've not come across Aiwo before, it's absolutely worth exploring this. I didn't know until recently that there were tools like this that actually are not complicated to build in. So again, thank you, Tommi, for sharing that. There is a question which I'm going to pose to you now from Fiona. What size of organization or volume of data would Aiwo usually deal with?
Yeah, this is a good question because it varies a lot. I mean, there's a minimum amount of data where it makes sense to actually take the machines into use. And that is normally when you have, let's say, hundreds of data coming per month. That's kind of the limitations, what makes sense. I mean, otherwise you should just read all of them and kind of discuss that within the company if you just have a tens of the feedbacks. So in our, the range what goes with our customers, we have a lot of, for example, this kind of a smaller, so to say, smaller, where you get the maybe hundreds to thousands of feedbacks or query data per month, retails, email retails. And then we have companies like in Australia, like a Foxtel, which is like it's hundreds of thousands of calls every single month, and really like millions of feedbacks every single month. So it's a really wide variety of data, but that's where we are ranging.
So it's so again, Fiona, I hope that answers the question, but I suppose what you need to know is that the volume will provide a statistical significance in its meaning, I suppose. Yeah. But Fiona, if that's something you want to explore specifically to your situation, then obviously reach out to Tommi and you can share those volumes with him. In terms of just wrapping things up, because we don't want to take up too much of your time this afternoon, I just want to summarize, sort of bringing us back up a level to the importance of ensuring that we know what we're doing with customer experience measurement. And just to confirm, Tanuj, I am going to answer your question in doing this. Ultimately, what Tommi has just explained is that we have a wealth of information within every organization, but it's what we do with that information that will determine if we're able to make change, and to make change meaningful and tangible. And if we're going to make change meaningful and tangible, we need to ensure that the way we are measuring the organization from a customer perspective aligns with the principles that you see on the left-hand side of the screen right now. It's always really important to get people to stop and reflect. Why are you measuring the experience in the first place? Why are you capturing insight? And as I've said a couple of times, I think businesses have lost sight of this, because unfortunately, we are a world that's obsessed with metrics. And because we're obsessed with metrics, many businesses convince themselves that we're measuring to get an NPS score. But that's not the case. That is an outcome of measurement, but it's not why we should be measuring. And ultimately, we need to be measuring the experience in a way that allows us to understand if the overarching strategy of the organization is going in the right direction. We need what we're measuring to be actionable, because ultimately, if we cannot understand how to improve, we're not going to be able to achieve what the business wants, that fourth voice of the business. And that's the key. What we need is to help the business achieve its strategic objectives. And unless our insight is actionable, in fact, unless any of our measurement is actionable, we won't be able to do that. We need to ensure, as I said earlier, that what we're measuring is understanding the relationship between what we do and the way the customer feels about it. What Aiwo's technology can help you to understand is what it is you need to focus on based on the data you're gathering. But it won't necessarily allow you to understand why. And this is why it's really important for me to continually preach about the importance of not just measuring VOC, but also measuring VOP, voice of the process. What we need to understand is what is causing customers to feel the way they feel. And to Tanuj's question, if we're going to understand which metrics, operational metrics or business metrics do we need to identify when aligning it with VOC, the thing that brings it all together is the customer journey. What you need to think about is that VOC should be giving you a measurable understanding of customer perception against the customer journey. Voice of the process allows us to understand a measurable view of what we're doing in relation to that customer journey. If you look at the image on the right-hand side of the screen, what I'm describing is the need for organizational alignment. We need to understand what the journey looks like, and we also need to understand what our processes look like that deliver the touch points in that customer journey. And what we should be measuring from a business perspective, a process perspective, are customer-facing operational processes. How long it takes to answer the telephone, accuracy of a statement, on-time delivery, the things that we do that will impact the way the customer feels in the journey. The reason that it's so important to keep aligning to the journey is that many organizations put processes in place without knowing there was a journey. Additionally, most businesses historically have measured what's important to the business, not what is important to the customer. And so it's very possible there will be customer-facing processes that your organization doesn't even measure. So if you're going to understand the relationship between cause and effect, process and journey, you need to measure processes that are aligned to the customer journey. What I'm describing is actually the most complex scenario of all in the field of customer experience. And if you want to know more about this, then please reach out to me afterwards, and I will give you some more information about what I'm describing. Final point I want to make is that last black box that I call sustained. What Tommi and his team do, what I'm describing to you with regards to this concept of customer journey management and delivering demonstrable change, these things are the most likely to enable an organization to sustain its focus on customer experience in the long term. Measurement is the thing that gets leaders to see that customer-led strategy makes a difference. But because many organizations are not measuring the experience well, because many are not turning that VOC into actionable insight, business leaders do not see the effect. And as a result, it's too easy to say that, do you know what, customer experience, it doesn't do anything for us. We're going to change the strategy and think about something else. So I'm hoping that this webinar today has just reinforced what you already know, but maybe given you a sense of maybe we could bring in something like Aiwo to help us make sure that all of the insight we're capturing is actionable, so we can deliver real measurable change. We've come to the end of our webinar. You'll be pleased to know, oh, we don't need that slide, Tommy. If there are any other questions that you have, I'm delighted to answer them now or to ask Tommy to answer them. But if you do need to continue with your day, I would urge you to please firstly connect with Tommy, connect with me if you're not already, and ask more offline. Tommy will be delighted to give you more of a detailed demo of the way Aiwo works and how easily it can be to integrate. But again, if you want more information about this subject of measurement in general, just ask, and either myself or the Aiwo team will do whatever we can to support you. So I hope you found that of value. Thanks again from me on behalf of Tommy and Aiwo for joining us this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons and indeed the rest of your week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, and thank you, Ian.
That's a pleasure.